Welcome, everybody. As you know, they have been destroying our money for quite a long time. Ever since they took us off the gold standard, price of gold in dollars has been skyrocketing, and the purchasing power of your dollar has been plummeting. I mean, it is so bad, it's almost difficult to comprehend. Since the Federal Reserve was born in 1913, the U.S. dollar has lost well over 95% of its purchasing power, and it just continues. But now, there is an effort at the state level to try to rein this in and bring gold back into circulation for commerce and transactions. And one of the guys right at the center of this whole movement joins us today here on Behind the Deep State. His name is Kevin Freeman. He's a host of the weekly television program Economic War Room with Kevin Freeman. That's on Blaze TV. He's also the author of Pirate Money, an incredible book outlining how we can deal with this incredible problem that has afflicted our country. He's considered one of the world's top experts on economic warfare and financial terrorism. He's been a consultant at the Pentagon, and he has worked with all the big agencies that you can imagine. And now he is going from state to state working with lawmakers, and they've had some great success already on trying to bring gold back into circulation. Kevin, it's an honor to have you on the program. Thank you so much for joining us today. Let's start with just some of the problem. I think some of our viewers will be familiar with this, but we've got a lot of people on TV and radio that maybe haven't been tuning in for as long, that maybe are not as familiar with this. Why should we even care about this? What's wrong with the U.S. dollar just being a fiat currency? What's wrong with letting the Federal Reserve create currency whenever they feel like it and lend it to us at interest? I mean, what's the problem with our current monetary system?
You know, Alex, there's so many answers I can give to that. Let's start with the most basic, and that is inflation. In 1971, I was 10 years old. You could buy a Hershey bar for a dime. Go to a convenience store today, and it's $3. The dollar's lost 90+% of its purchasing power over the last 50 years or so. And the Federal Reserve says, hey, we're going to hold inflation to as little as 2% every year. That's our target. If it goes below 2%, we're going to raise it to 2%. And so 2% of our purchasing power goes away every single year. And over time, that adds up. If you go back to 1913, when the Federal Reserve was established, we've probably lost 98% of our purchasing power. And, just to give you a comparison, my grandfather was alive, and a $20 bill or a $20 gold piece bought the same thing 100 years ago. Today, they don't buy anywhere near the same thing. That $20 gold piece with gold at $3,000 an ounce is worth, right now, $3,000 is 1 ounce of gold. My $20 bill will barely buy me a cheeseburger, fries, and a shake. And so that's what we're talking about. We're protecting against inflation. That's just one of the many things that we need to address with our monetary system, but inflation is one that hits everybody in the pocketbook.
Yeah, you're so right. And the Federal Reserve tries to make this all seem normal, even desirable. Oh, well, 2% is a good target for inflation, or maybe 3%. It's like, oh, really? So stealing 2% of my savings each year is a good target? What if you decided to take 20%? So let's get into this gold, right? I think a lot of Americans haven't really understood what happened with gold. I mean, we knew that at one time the dollar was as good as gold. Some of us still have those old bills that say this is redeemable in lawful money or in gold. And yet today, that is not the case. What happened? How did we move from a financial system, from a monetary system that was based on something tangible, something with value, something that couldn't be printed, to this current system that we have today?
Well, if you want the good history of it, you got to go back to the founding of this nation, and the founders knew that paper money not backed by anything was worthless. In fact, that's how we tried to finance our revolution with Continental notes, and they were supposedly backed by something, but when they checked the vault, there was nothing there. They had no gold or silver to back them up. They were worthless. So George Washington, James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, Thomas Jefferson, you name the founder, look at what they said about unbacked paper money. I think it's said best by Thomas Jefferson: paper is poverty. Washington says anybody that adopts a paper money system is opening the door to every sort of fraud and problems. So you go through that. They didn't want that. They put in the Constitution that only gold and silver coin could be money. Now, that was true until we hit the Civil War, And the South had their money, the Confederate money, and it wasn't backed by anything. And the North had their greenbacks not backed by anything. And that was a disastrous system. And so we went back on a gold standard, and that lasted until the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, which they said, yes, our money should be backed 40% by gold or silver. And that was decent. And then in 1933, Franklin Roosevelt confiscated everybody's gold certificates, gold backs, gold anything. They were all taken by the federal government, confiscated, and you could not even legally own gold. And, I said that today. I'm in Florida, and we're working with the Florida legislature, and somebody says, wait a minute, stop, what? Yeah, from 1933, I think, until 1973, it was illegal to even own gold. So how did we get to where we are? Well, in 1971, Nixon took us off the last linkage to the gold standard. You can no longer turn in your silver certificates and get silver. You couldn't turn in gold certificates and get gold. We didn't even back our gold to foreign nations. They put their gold on deposit here. We issued them U.S. dollars. They brought the dollars back, wanted to get their gold. And we said, no, it's no longer backed with gold. That's the history of money. And from 1971 to the present, we've endured a lot of inflation, particularly during the Jimmy Carter years and then the Joe Biden years.
Yeah. And before we get to the state level, which I know is one of the areas you're so passionate about, Kevin, I want to ask you a little bit about what's happening at the national level. Trump has been talking about going to investigate whether the gold is still there at Fort Knox, and Elon Musk has talked about live streaming it. And I've heard Trump talk many times about gold and what they've done to our dollar and how a gold-backed system would be desirable. I've interviewed members of Congress who have said the same thing. What do you make of what's happening? I mean, we see the price skyrocketing. We see a lot of talk from Glenn Beck actually was talking about hypothecation of gold. What is happening in the markets right now? What's happening at the federal level? Are you concerned about this? Are these indications of something good happening? Is it yet to be determined? What's going on?
Well, actually, the price of gold, we say it's skyrocketing, but relative to the debt, and you can look back at a chart from 1970 to the present, gold tends to track the federal debt. And it's actually a little undervalued given the level of federal debt that we have. There's a visual capitalist chart, I think, that demonstrates this. So it's the fact that we're producing so much debt, which means we have to borrow so much money, which means the Treasury and the Federal Reserve have to create so much money in order to offset all that debt. So the Federal Reserve buys our debt with created money. It's essentially a path to throwing more money into the system. And by the way, gold is not going up. It's that its purchasing power of the dollar is going down. Gold buys about the same amount of stuff today as it did 100 years ago. 100 years ago, if you had $20 bills, you could buy an average car, not the Model T, which was the entry level, which would be like, the entry level Kia or Hyundai today, and certainly not the most expensive car, but it would buy a decent Oldsmobile. Well, today, $20 times 20 pieces of gold or $20 bills. If you had the $20 paper bills, you could buy maybe a couple of tires. If you had the 20 gold pieces, that's 20 ounces of gold, that's about $60,000. You can buy a pretty decent car for that. It's held its purchasing power. So it's really not that gold is going up so much as it is that the purchasing power of the dollar is going down. Now, at the federal level, I'm actually quite concerned that Fort Knox has the gold or does not have the gold. If nobody ever checks on it, certainly it's not there. And why I say that is, why would you need to have it? You tell everybody you've got so much in gold and you say you're never going to look at it, never touch it, never do anything with it. Nefarious people will come along and find a way to sneak it out of Fort Knox or hypothecate it, loan it out, or borrow money against it, or do all sorts of nefarious things. So Trump is right. As president, he ought to go in and check to make sure that the gold is actually there. And interestingly, they're carrying it as an asset at $42 an ounce. Well, what if they valued it up to $3,042 an ounce? Then that gold would be worth quite a bit more. Other nations around the world are rapidly buying gold at their central bank level. So we ought to, as a nation, shore up our gold reserves. It's a necessary and important thing to be a competitive economy in today's world.
Yeah, fascinating. I want to turn to the state level now, Kevin. I know you're in Florida right now working on this, and I know you've been around the country working on this. In fact, every time I talk to a state legislator or a state treasurer about this, they're like, yeah, you need to talk to Kevin Freeman. So, woohoo, we're talking to Kevin Freeman. Kevin, you wrote a book on this, Pirate Money. You're going around working with state governments to try to get this back, the gold back into circulation. Talk to us about the big developments. I know you guys just scored big in Utah. Actually, the state treasurer there, Marlo Oaks, who's been on this program, congratulated you for your work on that. Talk to us about what just happened in Utah and what's happening across the country at the state level.
Well, it all started actually when I was 10 years old. I started dreaming of doing this. When we went off the gold standard in 1971, I watched my grandfather, who was a Cherokee, and he was working at a filling station, got a job as a rural letter carrier. And in the 1970s, inflation just destroyed him, and he died young. He died at like 70 years of age in around 1980, and the inflation just crushed him, and it was a terrible thing. And so I promised myself we'd do something about that. And my dad was teaching the Constitution. So technology comes along to where you can actually take gold and silver and you could put it in a vault and you could add a debit card to it and you could spend your gold like you would spend cash with Venmo or Zelle or PayPal or any of the apps. I thought, well, that's really cool as it's being developed. So I decided we're going to go to the states and we're going to convince them to use Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution, which says that no state shall make anything other than gold and silver coin legal tender in the state. And we're going to show them how they can make it modern by adding a debit card and transactional and all the benefits that would come from it. I wrote about this in a book called Game Plan 11 years ago, and then I started talking with the state of Texas, and 2 years ago we filed our initial legislation, didn't quite pass, but got close, and that's when I decided, you know what, I'm going to write the book Pirate Money and send copies out. And I did, and I started getting calls from state treasurers like Riley Moore in West Virginia, who called up and says, who are you, Kevin Freeman, and why do I have 10 copies of your book on my desk? People keep sending it to me. And I said, well, Treasurer, that's because your state, West Virginia, could offer gold and silver as currency. Well, how does that work? Now, he's now in Congress. Okay, then I reached out to my friend Ken Ivory in Utah, and he said, we'll be first. And he entered legislation. And I've been to Utah multiple times explaining constitutional history, how it works, why the Supreme Court cases support it, and, just connecting him to people that are in the business that offer the technology. And they just passed really seminal legislation that says that the state can pay its vendors. They'll have a choice. How do you want to be paid? Do you want to be paid in U.S. dollars, gold, or silver? Well, that's amazing legislation, and it's getting big press now. Well, it's not just Utah. It's 25 states. And as you mentioned earlier, I'm in Tallahassee right now. I stopped the meetings. We've met with key leaders in the Senate, key leaders in the House, the Treasurer's office. It's Jimmy Patronis, who's going to run for Congress in Matt Gaetz' seat. We met with the committees, and they're very excited about this as a possibility, how Florida, for the free citizens of Florida, can use gold and silver as currency protected by the state. But Oklahoma's doing this. Texas has brought it back. Kansas, we just got a bill that was filed in Kansas, just got out of committee. We're seeing states across the country, and you can learn about it at transactionalgold.com and read about whether or not your state, half the states in the United States, are enacting legislation. And they're calling me. We're flying there. We're doing telephone conference calls. I'm appearing by Zoom and video and web chat. Testifying in all these states. It really is a movement that started ever since I wrote the book Pirate Money, which explains how it works and why individuals can benefit from it.
Yeah, and I encourage people to get a copy of that book. I have one. It's a very valuable resource, folks. And don't just get one for you. Get one for your state representative, one for your state senator, maybe one for your governor or your state treasurer if you have relationships there that you can lean on. Kevin, some of the objections that you'll often hear, like the IRS, right? The IRS treats gold, generally speaking, as an investment. They like to have their share, the capital gains. And you and I both know there's no real capital gains here. They're just destroying the value of the currency, but it looks like a capital gain. How do we bypass and get around the obstacles that the federal government has thrown in the way here, trying to prevent the reintroduction of gold and silver as kind of currency or legal tender?
Well, there's several good answers to that. The first one is the IRS code, not a law. It wasn't passed in Congress that you tax gold and silver. Remember, up until 1973, for 40 years, it was illegal to own gold and silver. So then now they have gold and silver. What do we do with it at the IRS level? And they said, well, you know, you look at a $20 gold coin and it's got gold value that far exceeds that. And it's 1872, 1924. Maybe we should deem it a collectible because the gold value in it far exceeds the face value of it. It's really kind of like collecting stamps or Beanie Babies or something like that. So they started taxes as a collectible. That was never passed by Congress. It's an IRS code. But they left in the code some interesting things. They said if it's legal tender but not functional as currency, it can be taxed as a collectible because the legal tender aspect of it is really a fiction. It's not really legal tender. You're not able to spend it and get change or pay your employees with it or buy a movie ticket or buy gasoline. It's not really functional legal tender. Or if it's functional as a currency but not legal tender, which is Bitcoin, it functions as a currency. There are restaurants that'll take it and certain businesses will accept Bitcoin, but it's not officially legal tender. Well, then we'll tax it also, and it'll be taxed for capital gains. But they left open the idea that if it's functional currency and legal tender, like our U.S. paper money is, they said, well, that's not subject to capital gains tax. Now, that's not codified into law at the federal level, but it is codified in the Constitution. The notion that a state can have legal tender and as functional currency under Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution does not allow for the federal government to tax it and thus hinder it. And that's found in court cases, one of which is Lane County versus Oregon. If a state legislature chooses to act with gold and silver according to the Constitution, there's no basis for the IRS to tax it. Now, the good news, the really spectacular good news, is President Trump has already said he thinks it's immoral to tax the inflation component of capital gains. And by definition, the gold and silver capital gains are inflation. That's what causes them. They don't really increase in purchasing power. They basically hold purchasing power. And so any gain you have there is really inflation based. So he's already theoretically on our side. And the other good news is that there were conversations that have been had where people have read my book and they've told me, I think Trump will help with this. I think he'll ask the IRS to help with this. So we don't have it locked down in writing. We do believe we have a strong constitutional case. We do believe we have attorney generals. I met the Attorney General of Florida today. I know the Attorney General of Texas who plan to stand up and defend a state's rights. But I think the IRS will be receptive. It fits with the way they've interpreted their own code. And I think we have a very good shot at having the federal government stand down and let states do it. That's why we have to do it immediately while we have the Trump administration, and they are favorable.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more, Kevin. So there are a lot of states that are considering this. Texas has been kind of out in the forefront, thanks in part, I think, to your efforts. But in Texas, there's already a gold bullion depository. And as I understand the legislation introduced by Representative Mark D'Orazio, this would give people who want it like a debit card type thing where they could then spend it with a Texas merchant and it would just deduct the gold from their account. The merchant could be paid in Federal Reserve notes if he or she wanted. Give us some insight into how this system might work once it's operational.
Well, it is all about options and optionality, how people want to pay and how people want to be paid. But with technology, and there's an example, a company out of the United Kingdom, and right now testifying in Florida with me is Jason Cousins, the founder of Glint. And he says, look, you don't have to use my system. I'm just here to prove that it works, that you can go it. So Jason bought his plane ticket from Fort Lauderdale to Tallahassee, and he paid for it with gold. And he can show on his app, this is how much I paid. It was paid in gold, and they received U.S. dollars. But it's just as easy to turn on in the functionality in the app that says that somebody could receive gold instead of receiving U.S. dollars. And they could just take it gold to gold, peer to peer is what they call it. It'd be like when you send your buddy some cash on Venmo or Apple Pay or any of the other payment mechanisms. It just transfers out of my account and into yours, Alex. If I wanted to pay for a subscription to all your good work, I could just pay for it with gold. And you said, I don't want US dollars, I want gold. Now, how it would work in Texas is they have a bullion depository. And so I'd buy the gold. It would be held in the bullion depository, safeguarded by the state, guarded by the Texas Rangers with the big flag that says, come and take it on the front, you know, and Texans sitting in there like Chuck Norris, guarding and protecting the gold. And whenever I did a transaction, it would transfer from my account to somebody else's account, just like any other time you use a debit card. I mean, I never see the cash. If I use my debit card at the grocery store, I never see the cash. I don't pull it out and hand them the cash. It just transfers from my account to their account through the financial system. That's what would make it functional currency. And if it's made legal tender by the state and functional currency, I can then hold any dollars I receive in the form of gold or silver, or any gold I receive in the form of gold or silver in my account, and it would not be subject to the same inflation that paper money is subjected to. So it is a means of having an alternative personal gold or silver standard guarded, protected, and defended by my sovereign state.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And folks, if you've been tracking precious metals prices, you know exactly what he's talking about. I started buying a little bit of gold and a little bit of silver when I was in college, back when gold was $600 an ounce. Silver was, I think it was $750 an ounce for the first ounce I bought. Today, latest prices I saw, silver's at almost $34. Gold is over $3,000. And so, you know, and as Kevin explained, this isn't because the gold is suddenly more valuable. It's because your dollars are less valuable. So it's quite obvious why sensible people might want to hold their savings in something other than Federal Reserve notes. Kevin, we're down to just 7 minutes left in today's program, and I want to ask you how people can get involved in this, how they can learn more. We mentioned your book, Pirate Money. I think they ought to start by getting a copy of that. But let's say somebody's hearing us and they think, hey, I think I need that in my state. What is the best way to get well informed on this and then to get involved in pushing this?
Well, the first thing to do is go to transactionalgold.com. Let me back up. First thing to do is what you said, Alex. Get a copy of Pirate Money and read it. There's an audio version. You can listen to it. It takes about 4 hours to read it or listen to it. And that'll give you a primer. And then go to transactionalgold.com. We also have the URL constitutionalcurrency.org, which will take you to the same place. And you can look to see if your state is among the 25 moving forward on this. If they are, great. Give us your name and address. We'll keep you updated on any activity happening in the state. Maybe you'll go and do what I'm doing and testify and say, I really want this. It helped in Utah. We had several moms come in and say, look, I'm getting crushed by inflation. If you'll let us do this, we want to do it, number one. And if you'll let us do it, you'll protect families against inflation. And it really also will help reduce the wealth gap. I mean, people don't realize when you hear wealth gap, they think, oh yeah, the top 1/10 of 1%, they're getting so rich all the time, and it's because of the tax policies. No. Well, it's because big business favors them. No. It is truly because of the massive monetary printing that takes place in the U.S. It's the big debt. So if you look at the M2 money supply and plot it against the wealth of the top 1/10 of 1%, they're almost perfectly correlated. And then you look at the bottom 50% of Americans and you realize, whoa, they're not at all correlated. The more money you print, the less trickles down to the bottom. It's not the taxes that are the issue. It's the money spent and the printing of money that's the issue. So this solved the wealth gap. If you're feeling that pinch, go to transactionalgold.com, look at your state and say, hey, I need to be protected. And like I said, 2 moms showed up in Utah. And after their testimony, the Utah House voted unanimously for Ken Ivory's bill. Unanimously in the committee and unanimously in the House of Representatives. There were some abstains, but nobody voted against it. Bipartisan legislation. Why? Because it's actually good for everybody. And you can be a voice in your legislature as well. And so we'll help guide you in that. You can register, send us your name and email. We'll register you and keep you up to date, but then you can keep track of the bills. We have a bill tracker that notices wherever gold is mentioned or silver is mentioned, and we study the bill and then we report on the bill. And I'm telling you, 90% of them, our team has touched in some form or fashion. Give you an example, in North Dakota, Lady entered a bill, great representative, didn't know her. She heard about us from David Barton's Pro-Family Legislative Conference, and so she entered legislation. It lost in committee 7-5. She called us that night at 9 or 10 o'clock at night and said, hey, can you give me some talking points? Because every bill that happens in North Dakota in committee also gets a full House hearing. I said, sure. We gave her talking points. She won with 61% on the House floor after using her talking points. And she's like, this can pass. She turned around even the two of the voters against her in committee flipped after they heard her talking. So we can be a big help to the legislature. They need to hear from individual constituents, whether you send them a copy of the book or you direct them to the website or you connect them with us in some way. Every person watching this can make a difference in helping get America back to constitutional principles and back to money that's real, that can help solve the inflation problem.
Yep. Yeah, it's fascinating, Kevin. And one of the things that I think is so interesting about you and the movement you're leading here is that you actually are not working with any gold companies, gold dealers. In fact, you don't have a financial incentive here. In fact, you're funding this out of your own money, which I think gives you a whole new level of credibility. You're not like showing up as a lobbyist who wants some kind of help with some kind of thing that's going to make you money. You're just doing it for all the right reasons. And so we're very grateful for that. We're down to just about 2 minutes left, Kevin. So real quick, give us all the websites. How do they follow you again on X so they can keep updated on these things? And what's the easiest way to get a copy of the book, Pirate Money?
Okay, let's start with that. PirateMoneyBook.com will take you to a place you can buy the book. You can buy them in bulk if you want to from us directly. You can get them on Amazon. You can get it on Kindle. You can get it on Audible. PirateMoneyBook.com. The term pirate money is because we're talking about gold doubloons and silver pieces of 8, which were the foundational monetary system of the United States, and we're kind of returning back to that. You can follow us on X, PirateMoneyX.com. It's at PirateMoneyX for X. It's, I think, the same for True Social, but Kevin D. Freeman X is my personal Twitter/X handle. And economicwarroom.com is where you can watch our show, and piratemoneyradio.com is where you can listen to our podcast and hear our radio program. So I think I've covered most of the ways to reach us. But if you just go to transactionalgold.com and give us your name and email address, we'll make sure we put you on all the lists so we can get you up to speed on that, and it'll give you access to all the things that we're doing. Transactionalgold.com.
Excellent. Folks, go check that out. Kevin Freeman, thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you for your heroic work in this space. Good luck in Florida, and God willing, we shall talk to you again soon.
Thank you, Alex.
Absolutely. All right, folks, that's all we have time for today here on Behind the Deep State. But I want to thank you for tuning in. I want to encourage you to share this with your friends, with your family, with your legislators. Go get a copy of the book, get signed up on the mailing list. This is an excellent way that each of us can make a positive difference in protecting our savings, our economy, our freedom, even the middle class in America. And it's very, very simple. It's making progress all across the country. Just get involved somehow. Once again, thank you for tuning in. Alex Newman here, senior editor at The New American. You can find us at thenewamerican.com. This is Behind the Deep State, and we shall talk to you again next week. Until then, thanks for watching, and God bless you all.
If Americans want to remain a free and sovereign nation, more people need to understand the principles and values that built this great nation. At the John Birch Society, we have the organization, the plan, and the resources to do just that. Our founder, Robert Welch, said, "Education is our total strategy and truth our only weapon." Go to jbs.org to learn more, including how you can get involved to work locally and impact nationally. Join the John Birch Society today.